Hello YouTube and fellow tankers, this is King's Court and today we're doing a review of the Polish Premium Heavy 50 TP that's tier 8. Now this is relatively newer stuff that's come out. Now the Polish line is actually in the game where you can go through and actually earn the heavies. It starts out with mediums, which there is the Poodle, that's a tier 6 medium. Um, so that you can train the crew for that and then also then convert over to the heavy, which then you also now have a heavy premium option. So for those who are new, this is kind of like a review slash guide where I go through pros, cons, and then explain how to best play the tank. Also, I'm going to start including, if they are parts of lines, I'll include like modules and things like that and what to go for. And then also if how to explain or demonstrate what to do in the case that you're in a bad matchup. So here you can see the tank. It's a very cool looking tank. I really like the graphics that they did for it. Some things to note for it as we go into the pros. One, it's got super high alpha damage. So I think the base damage on it is like 440 or something like that. Which means, and I'm sorry, that's the average, which means it can go in all the way up to like 500 something damage. It has 218 pen, which means it's not necessarily at the tier 10 level, but it still holds up really well at tier 9, which if you look there, you'll see that it is a tier 9 gun. And then like for armor wise, it's decent armor. It's not the best armor, but it's decent. So you'll see the hull armor has got 170, the turret armor is at 210. But if you look at the shape and angling on it, the turret is going to be pretty powerful. The hull is pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's still pretty good. Now, the things that go into other pros to the besides the armor itself is that it has really good gun depression, better than a lot of the American tanks, which that's what their niche is they're known for having really good gun depression. So this thing actually competes with that, which means it actually is really going to be pretty powerful when you go on like on hills and stuff like that, like wherever there's hills or certain rises in the ground that can be used for angling. That means this thing will then become that much stronger. And actually, I take it back. If you saw there, like I said, the shell can actually get up to 700 damage. So and then here's showing the line. Like I said, it's a relatively new line, so there is only one path. And I wanted to compare it to the tier 8 that you can get. So you'll see that the tier 8 is similar, but when it comes to like, and the armor on the turret is actually similar. But when it comes to the armor of the hull, it is not. So like the hull is actually much weaker in comparison. I'm trying to see, where did I see it on here? There it goes. It's 110 millimeter, which means with the angling that it has on there, it's probably looking at like 160 millimeter to 180 millimeter. But that is like just straight like diagonal. This thing actually has the benefits of the like pike nose, but it's like a partial pike nose. So now getting right into it, someone like I mentioned, the tanks actually benefit the most from like hills and things like that. So some of the weak points is it does have lower glacis, obviously. That's pretty weak for a lot of tanks. This one, it's weak, but it's not necessarily too weak. The other thing that is a key note is right down the pike nose, there is a viewport that's strangely got like a box shape to it. So that makes that pretty much the key area that people are going to aim for as the weak point on the tank, because that's actually easier to hit than most tanks. So you'll see here, I'm taking up the location to where I can actually haul down. There's not a lot to really see except for my turret, and then as we mentioned, the turret has actually got really good angling, so it makes it pretty strong. And you'll see that there's another 50 TP that's over there trying to fight against me. So we're going to be basically firing back and forth on this. But getting into the cons, well, so the one, you have the whole track aspect to the tank. So the tracks actually sit pretty far ahead of the hull, which means when you're trying to like side scrape stuff like that, what ends up technically happening is they'll actually shoot your track out most likely. The other thing is when you gets into the like the sides and stuff like that, that's typically where you'll start taking a lot of damage pretty easily. The accuracy of the gun's pretty poor. But like I said, the alpha damage is really good, and the penetration is like okay for the tier for sure. Um, the other thing is it's not very fast, so it's okay in speed, but it's not anything crazy. So that's like, and then obviously as any heavy, right? By the way, so any heavy, the camo is pretty much crap, right? You're not going to get any really good camo. And then because it has the pike nose and the mm, like angling that you would typically see, it basically has benefits from both, but it doesn't have the significant strengths of either. So like a pike nose, you typically just point straight at your enemy, and that's the optimal armor because it's really hard to make sure that you hit right on the edge of it. And also the edge would have a lot of armor itself. But then at the same time, like when you have good proper angling, like 30 degrees, you tend to run into the scenario where it's you're able to split targets and things like that. So like this thing can't really split targets, and it can hold up against straight ahead against targets. But then again, certain targets you won't be able to, so that kind of sucks. But now, guides on how to play this tank. Obviously, if you can get into hill combat, that is primo. You definitely want to be in the hill scenario. So wherever you see hills and things like that, that's definitely really good to be in. If you can't get in the hills, use stuff like you saw that I was doing, where there's like certain mounds or debris. Use those to your advantage. So here's where you'll see like, hey, I'm trying like, well, now he swapped to high explosives just to mess with me. You'll see I'm not even gonna bother trying to nail him because of the amount of enemies. So like I said, you can't really split targets in this. So you'll see like if they get the side of me, there's nothing I can really do. I'm not gonna be able to stop them, right? So just because they got the side of me, that's pretty much over. You can't really do anything about that. So instead, you want to actually, and you'll see right there, like the moment his tracks were out, I could see the tracks and I can pen right through that. So you bear that in mind. It's something that most people don't necessarily realize is that the tracks will actually stick far enough out, and the side is definitely pretty weak, which then allows it. And then not only that, but you'll see here in certain cases, like for example, I'm using the Japanese tank to protect me, right? Because I can actually see right over there, and that makes it to where it's hard for them. But bear in mind, with this angling right now, my tracks would be farther out. So they could technically track me. Now, obviously, this guy's going to back off because he's not my bro, you know. He doesn't like me very much because we're not same nation. If I was Japanese, it'd have been a whole different story. So, you know, and it's okay to back off, especially when you got all these different targets. So you'll see here, kind of picking it out when you need to is good, and it does have enough maneuverability that can get around. So you see that I picked up speed just to get up to like 24, 25. But that's what I'm saying, like it's not super fast. I think its top speed's like 32 maybe. All right, nothing really too crazy. So here's where, and actually, truthfully, I was doing wrong there. So, but I didn't know exactly where this guy was going to be. So I'm exposing my tracks. So I got lucky. He was aiming at my turret. If he was smart, he would have been aiming at my tracks, and he would have taken. He probably would have killed me right there if he was aiming for the tracks. So, and that's where, you know, like dead bodies do come into a benefit. So you'll see I'm using dead body now. I think he's shot. Right. So here's again. He overexposed his side. So you saw that for the side, it went green pretty quick. So that's where the angling is kind of important there. So like there again, he didn't aim into my track. That's where he really should have been aiming. So this thing, the con is if you're giving your side, that's pretty much over. And there's that driver port that I was talking about. So you saw that it was boxed, and it's definitely a weak point. So if you go to brawl, this thing cannot brawl. Well, let me rephrase. It'll brawl as long as your opponent doesn't understand the weak spot on it. If they do understand it, yeah, you're not going to want to brawl because like even an IS-6 can beat you in a brawl going against that, mainly because the angling to the IS-6 is probably better. Now, the only thing that might work out in your benefit against an IS-6 is this thing might be slightly taller, and that's one thing to note when going against like things like that. Is you can actually get a down angle onto the top of their turret, and that will count as a weak point because no tank was really designed to be able to take shots from above. So you see here, I was able to smack the T-29 for some more damage. but that's about it. And then there's no way to really stop it if he's going to take the time to aim, which was smart on his part. So now key things to note, right? So this thing can see tier 10s. So the question is, what tanks do you need to be careful with, right? What are bad matchups? So one, anything with really high penetration and decent fire rates are going to be a bad matchup for you. So what does that mean? Most of the tank destroyers are definitely going to be scarier for you. The other thing is because of the design of this tank and the kind of like the flatness of it and the size of it, it turns out that a lot of artillery is probably going to shoot you. So you definitely want to be very careful about spots where artillery is going to be able to go at you. Now here's a part where you can see, like I said, this thing's got great depression, so it's totally worth getting into a position where you can actually use your depression, which this is like hill combat. Usually there's a lot of mediums here, so you'll see here I'm just getting up here, able to not like just start bullying mediums and lights where they're typically going to be right there, wait, like thinking, oh, hey, there's going to be mediums here, and now there's a heavy, right? So then you'll see even a T29, it's like, okay, yeah, T29, I could technically fight, but I got to be a little careful because one, I see, okay, this Lorraine came over, which good, we took care of that. Now, back to the tanks to watch out for. So, for example, tank destroyers that are at the tier or lower the tier, not necessarily going to be super scary, except for particular ones that have like really knockout guns, such as like ISU 152 when it has the big gun, right? It actually has more than enough penetration to go right through you. Same statement goes for like JPEGs, right? So the JPEG 2 can get a decent gun with high penetration and decent accuracy. When it comes to heavies, things that you want to watch out for is probably like the VK, like let's say, what is it, 101. If it's got the better gun on it, that's higher alpha, and then decent penetration, which if they're smart, they're going to start running premium ammo against you, and that makes it to where they can start penning you pretty good. T32s, stuff like that, you don't really have to worry too much about, but it's the same deal as if they start using premium ammo, you might want to start trying to use angling to your benefit because that's actually where they will actually start penetrating through. The newer heavy lines, those are the ones you got to be very careful with. So we're talking about the objects like 715, I think is like one of them. Or 705. I can't remember all of them offhand, but I know like the Russians got a new line, then the Germans got a new line. So like the Kampfenwagen, whatever, the big beastie looking heavy. You definitely don't want to see that thing because that thing is going to eat you. The same thing actually goes for your own line in the Polish. So the Polish heavy line. The top tier, the 60 TP or whatever, 50 TPs too, or not 50. Yeah, I think it's 50 and 60 TP. You want to stay away from them. They're going to be scary. So, for example, like even in this matchup, the Scorpion G is another one that I need to technically watch out for. Now, after that, right, like then there's just a lot of tanks that you just don't really have to worry so much about, right? Angling isn't going to be that big of a deal. So here you'll see that the T29 is able to pen me. Right? But again, it's because I'm giving off too much of my side. I'm not angled appropriately, and when you have any bit of your side really going to them, this thing just starts failing. So you need to keep pretty focused on the targets that are like where you're trying to block. So for example, I would say aim it like 10 degrees. If you are going to try to go offset your target, only do like 10 degrees because the moment you start doing 30, what ends up happening is you're giving too much of your side and it becomes too easy to penetrate you just from aiming through your tracks. Let's see. Is there mediums you should watch out for? So I would say yes. So there definitely are. So the German line mediums, they technically become pretty accurate with decent penetration, so you want to watch out for them. I'm looking at you, Panther 2. And the same thing with like E50 and E50M. Definitely don't want to mess with those. For that same statement, you want to watch out for the lights of that line too, because like you got the Rue. They all have basically the same kind of penetration, same gun accuracy and everything. Amongst the Russians, I think you're pretty okay. They don't have typically high penetration, but they'll have decent alpha. But they are pretty accurate too, so you got to bear in mind the whole side stuff. So if they're flanking you, that's pretty bad. Um, Other than that, like the Progetto, the Standard B, I'm sorry, I should say the Progetto 46, the Progetto 65, the Standard B, those are ones you definitely want to be careful of. They are going to mess you up. Now, that said, you can mess them up almost as equally if you get a shot into them. But the, what is it, Pantera, that one you should be okay. So it only has like 210 penetration, which with your hull and turret, you should be okay there. Because bear in mind, this thing has 170 millimeter in the hull, but because of the note, like the cone shape, or I'm sorry, pike nose, and then kind of like the angling, it's really sitting at like 230, 240. That makes it pretty hard to penetrate. So the takes that I'm talking about, they're all sitting at like 240 to 260, 270, 290 penetration. So it makes it to where, yeah, that hull's not going to hold up. They're going to be able to knock you right through it. Other than that, that's really the gist of the tank. If you are in a bad matchup, play this thing kind of defensively. So see if you can't, maybe other team members can actually get the enemy to pop out shots, and then all you want to do is kind of roll forward, take a little time to aim, pop in a shot if you can get a weak spot on the enemy, and then call it a day, get back, right? And then basically do that as support, because you can definitely pump out some crazy alpha damage with this. So these two matches that I'm showing, they're both around 3K or higher. And that's probably going to be pretty typical in a good match in this tank. So definitely a cool one to play. It's definitely worth it because it's the only one for the line right now, obviously. So if you are interested in the Polish line, I definitely recommend getting the premiums. Obviously for crew training. Money-wise, it definitely can make some money. So because it can do the high alpha damage, most premium tanks, if they have high alpha damage, they definitely pull in some good cash. Because every time you're hitting for the alpha, that's money in the bank right there. Other than that, I mean, bear in mind its maneuverability, like turning sideways and stuff like that, is not necessarily all that great. And as you can see here, the engine power is not good enough to keep allow it to maintain going up hills very well. So here's a case again, like I'm on a hill, so I'm actually able to use my gun depression, to angle and keep it to where my opponent can't really do anything to me, but I can punish him, especially now that he's out in the open, right? So here's again, -10. Now, one thing I will make sure to emphasize here, that -10 doesn't do you so good when you're going from the sides. So the side, like as you're looking over the side, you actually seem to lose some of that depression. So just bear that in mind. And sadly, this guy's being a real prick. So, which I get to end this with y'all getting to watch this guy go drown himself because he's a poor sport and doesn't like that he's losing. So, again, I hope this stuff's really useful for y'all. Please feel free to like, subscribe. I'm Shrine King. Again, this is King's Court. If you're looking for other reviews and that, please go ahead and look at. I have plenty of videos on my channel, and I'm going to keep bringing in these kind of videos. And also, please let me know if there's things that you're looking for, particular tanks that you want to see, or maybe particular scenarios that you're running into problems and you can use some advice. Just anything. Let me know if there's maybe advice that you have for me on like things that you want. The last advice that I got was to make sure to start including, what to do in a bad matchup, and then like also emphasize on the modules and things like that for the tank and how to best maybe equip them. This was all really good advice, and I really appreciated the feedback. So again, I really hope all of this is working for you and is really good for you. And I look forward to seeing you or catching you guys on the next videos, and hopefully getting to see some of your reviews. All right, you guys have a good one.